We did the history of Godzilla's roar, we did it for King Ghidorah, and now it's time for everyone's favorite flying giant lava monster, Rodan. Most non-super kaiju fans probably wouldn't be able to recognize Rodan's roar, but for us super fans, we know that this roar has lasted the true test of time, hardly changing for over 60 years. With Godzilla, King of the Monsters, making new fans of kaiju all over the world, what better time than now to go over the history of Rodan's roar? Residents, this is Jacob, and let's get to it. The star scream of the kaiju genre, Rodan, first made an appearance in 1956 with the monster's very own standalone film. The roar that came with this movie would go on to become the template for all Rodan roars to follow. With what I like to call the three-part roar, the original shriek would start off with a high-pitched tone that would go to a throaty scream and then fade away into a long, drawn-out exhale. Here, listen close and you may be able to hear what I'm trying to describe. Those three changes in pitch and tone would become the staple of the Rodan roar. Within this roar, you can hear that they used the sound of birds chirping as an inspiration for certain sounds that came from the monster. Even then, the roar still managed to capture the sound of what we imagine pterosaurs would have sounded like, which made perfect sense considering Rodan's design is supposed to be a blend of both birds and the ancient flying reptiles. The original roar had a surprising amount of variety, as you can hear it change for different emotions that are happening within the two Rodan that star in this movie. Especially when you consider the time that this movie was made, way before modern sound design techniques were developed. There was even the sound of Rodan flying that sounded like a jet mixed with the noise of a whistle that would also continue to be heard in future adaptations. While Toho never officially detailed how Rodan's roar was designed,
alright then, keep your secrets.
There are rumors that it was developed in the same sort of fashion as Godzilla, utilizing instrument strings and other random objects like a leather glove to create these iconic roars. If any of you residents know more about this, feel free and let me know down in the comments. The Showa era of Godzilla movies had the most appearances of Rodan, and with this came more of the monster's legendary roar. There was not much change in the new sound of the roar, as the 1956 original really didn't nail it for the creature, but there were a few minor tweaks here and there. Overall, the quality of the roar greatly enhanced due to more money and better technology to be able to make monster movies in the 60s. Toho managed to somehow make the new roar sound even more like a bird, but also even more like a monster. Here, listen. Notice how it sounds a lot like the first Rodan roar, but also sounding a bit more like the monster was in an echo chamber. The Showa era had even more variety in the squawks and screeches of Rodan, which helped give the monster even more emotions to play with. You can hear growls and snarls for expressions of anger, and is that a bloody elephant? The Heisei era only had one appearance for Rodan, but this lone sighting of the monster delivered some of the same sounds and roars that made the original Rodan so loved by the fans. There were more growls, and the overall tone of the roar was deeper and more threatening. This take on the Rodan roar certainly wanted to make the monster seem more at place when fighting against or alongside the Heisei era Godzilla. If you listen closely, you can hear that this roar has a more animalistic sound as well. Now this may just be me, but within some of the multiple variants of roars coming from Rodan, it almost sounds like Toho used some recycled versions of the Ghidorah roar of that time. What do you think? The Heisei era Rodan roar kept very consistent to the roars that came before it, but you can't deny that this take on the roar was the best at that point in the time it's showing the ferocity of this winged beast. When Godzilla and the rest of the world transitioned into the new millennium, Rodan's roar still kept most of its classic sound. It had the monster grunts, the bird chirps, and of course the three-part roar. What the new millennium take on Rodan did bring to the table though, was that Toho gave the roar a more eerie sound to it. Perhaps this was to help Rodan fit the darker tone of this movie, but nonetheless, it sounded damn cool. Out of all the roars of Rodan, this was the first one that made the monster sound as large as he really was. When we were first given sound bits of the new roar that would be coming with the King of the Monsters, MonsterVerse Rodan, there were a portion of fans who weren't all that happy with the roar due to it being the first drastic change in the design since the very original Rodan 60 years before it. After hearing the roar in the movie itself, however, I'm happy to say to you classic Godzilla fans that the roar is much more close to the original roar than we all thought. While the bird chirps are mostly gone, and this take really welcomed the monster aspect to its roar, it still has the standard elements that go into a Rodan roar. Yes, the 3-part roar can be heard in Godzilla King of the Monsters if you listen close. You can still distinguish some bird-like squawks and cackles in this new roar, especially what sounds like an eagle's screech right here. Naturally, this is the most monster-like of all the roars, but it still managed to have elements thrown into its design that represented birds, monsters, and pterosaurs, creating a perfect balance, as all things should be. Rodan's roar is definitely more of an underground favorite amongst fans of the genre, much like the monster itself. But for any part of an over 60-year monster roar design to stay damn near identical over the decades, it must have meant that the original creators did something right. What do you think? Residents, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see one on Mothra's roar next, make sure to share this video to all your friends and tell them to become residents of Dangerville. As always, residents, this has been Jacob, and peace out.